G'day guys, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to do something different. I'm going to speak to mainly the people out there that are mixing. That means my fellow composers, producers, / anyone else who likes to mix. This is a rather controversial topic I'm about to bring up today. I'm about to share a secret with you that has helped me immensely. Some people hate this idea, some people absolutely love it. I'm the latter. Are you ready? Let's do it. I want to talk to you firstly about my room. This house, when it was completed, my wife and I moved in and somehow I convinced her to let me use one of the bedrooms as a music room. And this is what you're looking at right now. This room was my pride and joy of finally my own space to do my own thing. Now, while it's not very big at all, it's big enough for my needs. I remember the moment I first set up my speakers in the room. And put everything in place and then hit play just to hear what it sounded like in here. I was a little nervous, and rightfully so, because it sounded shocking. I couldn't even tell where things were panned in the stereo image, and the frequency balance, everything sounded really boomy and boxy compared to how I knew that track should sound. It was actually quite devastating, and I quickly realized that I needed to try and treat this room to try and address those issues. And you can see here the amount of treatment that I've put in this room. I've spent probably close to 3,000 Australian dollars, which is, I don't know, 50 US dollars. And this treatment was not a waste of money. It made a huge difference straight away. The bass traps in the corner there, they did a lot to balance out the frequencies. And the treatment on the ceiling and on the sides really helped treat those reflections and cleared up the stereo image perfectly. The room went from being totally unusable to now being, quite possibly a decent mixing place. So I did still, though, have quite big problems with the frequency balance in the room. And there's really no way to get away from that. I started cramming even more acoustic treatment in this room. I started treating the back and putting more bass traps everywhere and diffusion, thinking that I would be able to make this perfect. But no matter what you do to a space like this in this size, you can't get your room sounding perfect. You will always have room modes and sort of resonant frequencies that just bounce all over the place. So what else can I do? There is an answer. I found the joys of room EQ. Now, room EQ makes a lot of engineers shudder in their chairs and shiver in their seats because the idea of placing some EQ on your master chain for the sole purpose of just correcting issues that you have in your room feels dirty to a lot of people. And I get it. EQs can introduce, phase issues and all sorts of other problems. And it doesn't feel nice having this EQ on the end. But for me, it's solved a problem that I've had with this room that has now given me confidence to know that whatever I hear in this room and whatever I send out to my clients will sound just as good anywhere else as it does in here. And I'm willing to pay the price of having a little EQ on my master bus for that. So, do you really need room EQ if you have a small room or if you have an unideal acoustic space? No, you don't have to, and many people don't. But here's the problem. When you mix in your room, your ears are hearing a balance of frequencies that are negatively affected by your acoustics. The mix decisions that you make will be totally reliant upon what you're hearing. The mixes that you put out to the world are very likely going to be heard on ears with different frequency balances to what you're hearing, because nobody else is in your room hearing your mix. They're in their car, they're in shopping centers, they're all over the place. They're in the cinema, the theater. And the problem comes is that you think your mix sounds great, and it probably does in your room, but does it everywhere else? This is the problem I ran into, mix translation. My mixes didn't translate well outside of my little room. Now, to use Room EQ, you need to actually figure out what the problems are with your room. Now, this video is not supposed to be an ad for various products, but I will show you what I'm using because I've found it effective. The main software that I've used to both measure and correct with EQ my room deficiencies is called Sonarworks Reference. And you can see this is what the software looks like inside my door. It's just a plugin that runs in my Cubase. I can also run it in my system. There's a system-wide option. So I've chosen to apply this EQ even outside of my door because, I mean, what's the point of only having an accurate sound inside Cubase? Well, I want it in YouTube as well, you know. So it's really great. It comes with a little microphone. You set it up. You follow the instructions. It plays bleeps and bloops through your speakers. It's fantastic. Actually, it's quite painful. The noises are hideous. But it doesn't last long. You move the microphone around to various positions in your room as it tells you to. And it spits out this little graph that shows exactly what the frequency balance is detected in your room. Now, this was very interesting to me for a couple of reasons. A bunch of things started to make sense to me. And if you have a look here, you can see that my room is far from ideal. Down here at 50 Hertz, I've got a massive peak. And then just at about 100 Hertz, I've got a massive dip. And then you can see my low mids here between 1 and sort of 250-ish to 300. There's just a massive boost there. And from what I gather, this is fairly common in smaller rooms. From there on, it's bearable, except I've got slightly augmented high frequencies, possibly from the monitors that I'm using, Atom A77X. Which have a ribbon tweeter, which is quite prominent. But this was very useful knowledge to me straight away, even without doing anything else. Looking at this graph educated me. My mixers, when I took them out to other places, sounded very, very thin. And you can see why. Because my room was telling me that I have a lot more mids, low mids in my mix than what I really had. So I would cut mids or low mids way more than I would need to. And the effect was it would sound perfect in here and I would take it out somewhere else. And where's all the body gone? It sounds thin and weak. So just this visual representation of what is going on in your room does a lot. And things should start to make sense for you. People's will look drastically different to this. I've seen some that look way worse than this. It's been said that, well, I've read that if it's within 6 dB, then you're doing okay. And this is my room after treatment. Before treatment, I had peaks up to over 12 dB all over the place. So this is an improvement. Now, this software, after it's measured your room, has the capability of applying correction. And if you have a look here, we're looking at the measured curve, but I can choose to show the correction. And if you just look at it imposed over the top, you can tell it's just an inverted EQ curve, basically, an extremely complicated one at that, because it actually detects differences between the left and the right channel, and it compensates for both. So you can see that it's trying to counteract the acoustic problems that I have in my room so that I can hear a more balanced frequency response. Now, the important thing to remember is that this EQ curve is not actually applied to your mix when you send it out to the world. It just sits on your master chain for your ears only. As soon as you go to export it, you deactivate the plugin because you don't want to print that. This is just an EQ for your room. This is why it's called a room EQ. Now, I actually apply that EQ on my monitoring channel in Cubase, which I'm sure other DAWs have as well. And the beauty of that is I don't have to remember to activate it and deactivate it. It just gives me the EQ here, and when I export it bypasses it. So that's fantastic. All right, enough yapping, Blakes. I am going to try and emulate to you on YouTube what it sounds like in my room before the treatment, before the EQ, and what it sounds like after the EQ. And the way I'm going to do that is by using ProQ's EQ match feature. I've already done it before. I played pink noise through the system and I ran it before and after the Sonarworks plugin to generate an EQ profile that looks totally wonky, but you'll see that it's pretty accurate. If I just disable this correction, this EQ is basically applying the EQ of the deficiencies in my room. Now it's a little spikier than this, but it's actually, to my ears, it sounds spot on of what it sounds like without the EQ. You can see here that it's basically matching Sonarworks' detected EQ. So it's doing the opposite of what Sonarworks is doing. Sonarworks corrects with this, but what I'm wanting to do is, for the purpose of this video, is reverse that. I'm wanting to actually show you how bad my room sounds. And the whole point of why I want to do this is because you might be in a similar situation without even being aware of it. So, all right, I'm going to just play. I'm working on a track at the moment. It's something I did last year, but it's still not finished. And I'm going to play it to you with this EQ on. So what you're about to hear is this piece of music through my deficient room. Enjoy. Okay, so the interesting thing about this and the joys of just YouTube in general is that you guys could be watching this from anywhere. The device that you're listening on, whether it be speakers or earphones, they also have their own frequency balance as well. So just keep in mind that you could be listening through this deficient room of mine through your own deficient room, which is going to be weird, but I still think you will be able to tell the difference when I deactivate this in a minute. Now, that sounded not too bad to me, to be honest. And the reason why it didn't sound too bad, it might have sounded a little choked in certain frequency areas, but the reason it didn't sound too bad is because at the moment we don't know any better. And that's what happens. And engineers use this all the time. I bet all of you have heard this before. The most important thing is knowing your room and knowing your speakers. And that is so true, because with that knowledge, you can make better mixed decisions. But that's the argument a lot of these engineers use to not use room EQ. They say that our knowledge of the room should be enough, and we should be, it's like a purist kind of approach. Whereas I'm challenging that, and I'm saying I want to hear out of my speakers what most people, or the average of what most people would hear, which is kind of close to flat, So I'm going to play that same section again, and I'm going to play it exactly the same as I did before with my deficient room, and you'll see me here. I'll actually deactivate this EQ, which will put everything back to flat, and you will hear it with just your system. And maybe that's deficient, maybe it's not, who knows. But I'm interested to talk about the difference. All right, we're going to turn it off. Can you hear that difference? One of them just sounds very to me, and the other one sounds open. Now, I don't like switching backwards and forwards while something's playing for a few reasons, but I just wanted to do that then to show you very obviously the difference. The problem with doing it immediately while something's playing is that our ears and our brains are clever enough to actually start compensating these things. So this warped frequency response to us after a while sounds pleasing. We don't even think about it. And that's the danger. But if you give your ears a break first, then turn it off, and then listen. you can hear the difference. So it's more obvious to spot this in a very full arrangement where the whole frequency spectrum is represented. I don't really have that in this piece. I've got a bigger section towards the end, which I'll show you. So I'm going to do the same thing, but we'll do it with a bigger, louder section of the song. All right, now this is flat. This is what it sounds like to me with Sonarworks activated. I'm deactivating the funkiness. All right, so hopefully you can hear what I'm talking about. Now, it just occurred to me as we were playing that if your room is deficient in a certain way, or if your headphones have a balance of a certain, that is quite, different, to some of you, it might actually sound better with this EQ on. Remember, this isn't Sonarworks. This is an EQ that's actually showing you how bad my room is. And if it sounds better to you with that on, I would suggest to you that your headphones maybe need replacing with some better ones, or that your room has significant issues like mine did. All right. So, yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. All right. So I'm not saying that this mix is perfect. It's far from it. It's unfinished at the moment, but I hope it gives you an idea of how much I'm actually benefiting from getting rid of the inadequacies of my room and correcting them with my room EQ. Now, there's a whole bunch of you that are already probably using room EQ. You've already seen the light. Oh! There are top engineers in the top studios. You'd be surprised to know how many of them actually use small amounts of room EQ as well. They often don't need to have crazy ones like me in this small bedroom because they've already got finely tuned rooms. There's a much more subtle than this. But for me, even though this is one of the nastiest EQ curves I've ever seen in my life, it has changed my life. And my mixes have become so much more consistent, and they translate far better because of it. Okay, so Sonarworks can be a bit expensive. It does go on sale every now and then. But what other options do you have? Okay, in the beginning, before I found out about Sonarworks, you can get apps on your phone. There's one just called RTA Lite, I think. It's just a real-time analyzer that shows you the frequency spectrum. It's tuned to your phone's speaker. I'll even put a link to it in the description underneath this video. And you can sit that in the most basic form, sit it in the listening position of where you're mixing, play some pink noise through your speakers, just for now at the same kind of level that you like to mix at, and look at the frequency spectrum. Is it flat, or can you actually see dips and peaks? If you can, pull out a Pro Q, start fiddling around until things start to look more flat. But in the end, the whole point of this EQ isn't to just find the 100% accurate solution to your room. What you're really trying to find is what sounds good to your ears in this room. Listen to a whole bunch of mixes that you love, that you know are awesome, that are made by other people that are just geniuses, and listen to them through that EQ. Does the bass sound too thin? If so, crank the bass in your Pro Q. Make all the bass that comes through your system a bit louder. Is the bass in your room overwhelming you? Can you actually? It doesn't have to match up with the measurement on the phone. Me, for example, I actually chose to do this measurement in Sonarworks without my subwoofer on. And the reason for that was because I found after this particular software, after that it had corrected my room, I didn't feel like I had enough really sub bass going on. It didn't sound like everything else sounded great to me, but I was missing bass. So I went and re-measured my room with my sub. I just physically turned it off. And then after it measured my room and it found the curve, I turned my sub back on, and it just happened to be perfect to my ears. And that's the point. You want to find a curve for your room EQ that sounds perfect to your ears, not some mathematically correct thing. Yes, having it based on being flat in this software helps bring you closer to what sounds naturally good. But in the end, especially with bass levels, those things are really subjective. Some people like more than others. I happen to like to be able to feel my bass a little bit, which is why that turning my sub off during measurements trick probably worked for me. Software like Sonarworks even introduces the ability for you to be able to keep yours flat, or do you want to adjust the curve that it found? You know, do you want more bass or less bass? Do you want to tilt the whole frequency? The whole point is it's got to sound good to you, because if it sounds good, if you can get it to where all these mixes from other people that you're listening to sound good to you, you are more likely to make good decisions that kind of come close to what you're hearing in other people's stuff. So the whole point of this is it makes you better at what you do. It gives you confidence that what you're hearing is actually what others will hear. And for me, it's probably the single biggest thing that has helped my production quality. Here's something else that's really interesting. This doesn't only apply to your room and your monitors. This also applies to headphones. Various headphone manufacturers have wildly different EQ curves, which affects us in the exact same way as a poor acoustics in a room would. You know what I mean? So the cool thing about Sonarworks, and this is not an ad for Sonarworks, I'm sorry, but it sounds like it. I can click this headphone button and it automatically goes to my custom curve for my Beyerdynamic headphones. And you can see that it's got some weird quirks to it. And it sounds so much better through my head. So if I get my headphones out and put them on, I just click this button to switch to it. And the beauty of using room EQ properly like this in tandem with your monitors and your headphones, it sounds exactly the same frequency balance wise in my headphones as it does through my speakers. So I have confidence when I'm mixing that if I'm using my headphones, I know that I'm making the same kind of decisions that I would as if I was using my monitors. And that's comforting to me because I know that my room EQ is helping me to create mixes that translate. Now, if you didn't want to pay for Sonarworks for your headphone correction, there is another one by Tone Boosters, which is fantastic, called Morphit. It's much cheaper. It's only, I can't remember how much it is, but it's very affordable. And it has all of these headphone models in there. And it has the average frequency response of all of these models of headphones built in. Let's test it. The Beyerdynamic DT770. Oh, look at this. This is interesting. Now, this is the correction curve, and I've just selected the correction curve on Sonarworks as well. And if you look, the scale's different, obviously, but it's doing the same thing in about the same spots. Pretty much identically. Wow. That's really cool. So this one has so many headphone models in it. It's likely if you have, a known set of headphones, it's probably going to be in here. Have fun with it, play with it, turn it on and off. And here you'll get to hear immediately without much effort what a flat response sounds like in comparison to what the natural headphone response is of your earphones. You might be surprised. These headphones that I use have a lot of high end in them. So my mixers sounded dull everywhere else because I was undercompensating in the high frequencies. And you can see here the Sonarworks profile and this one, they dull the high frequencies so that in the mix, I'm forced to push more high frequencies in, which means that it translates better everywhere else. Same thing. All right, I feel like I've been talking about this for long enough. I'm going to stop there. I hope that this was interesting and useful to you. Please, if you have any questions, just type them below and I will do my best to get back to you. This is something I just wanted to share with everybody because it's one of those rare things that you come across that actually makes a huge difference, at least for me. Good luck with it. Have fun. See you later.